For the first time, Vice President Kamala Harris is pulling back the curtain, revealing untold moments, private struggles, and the high-stakes decisions that could change the course of history. This is 107 days, and you've never seen her like this before. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Imagine this. The Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, not behind a podium, not at a press conference, not delivering a carefully rehearsed speech, but sitting down and talking as a person. Not a politician, not a strategist, just a human being. Raw, unfiltered, and honest. That's exactly what happens in 107 Days, the groundbreaking documentary that pulls back the curtain on the most difficult stretch of her political career. For years, the public has known Kamala Harris as the sharp prosecutor who grilled witnesses in the Senate, the confident running maid who made history on the 2020 campaign trail, and the groundbreaking vice president who shattered barriers for women and people of color. The image has always been one of strength, composure, and history-making. But this film takes us somewhere different. It takes us past the headlines, beyond the polished appearances, and into the moments that nearly broke her. We see her doubts. We see her struggles. We see the weight of leadership pressing down so hard that she admits sometimes she almost wanted to quit. And that's why people are calling this documentary not just political, but deeply personal. Because for the very first time, Harris opens up like never before. A glimpse behind the curtain. What makes 107 Days so gripping is its honesty. Political documentaries often focus on strategy, polling numbers, and campaign drama. But this one does something far more daring. It focuses on vulnerability. The cameras follow Harris during one of the toughest stretches of her public life, 107. 107 intense days where every move she made was scrutinized, every decision second-guessed, and every misstep magnified. There are moments where she speaks candidly about being underestimated, about the loneliness of leadership, about what it feels like to be the first woman vice president, and the pressure that comes with knowing every mistake could be weaponized, not just against her, but against every woman who will come after her. In one particularly emotional scene, she talks about the nights she lay awake, questioning if she was doing enough, if she was good enough, if she was strong enough to carry the role that history had placed on her shoulders. That level of honesty is rare. For a politician, almost unheard of. The struggles few see. One of the film's strongest elements is how it doesn't shy away from conflict. Harris doesn't just share her victories, she shares her scars. We see the backlash she has faced, the criticism from opponents, and even the doubts from within her own party. The film doesn't edit out the awkward moments, the disagreements, or the times she stumbles. Instead, it highlights them, reminding viewers that leadership isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. There's a raw authenticity in watching one of the most powerful women in the world admit that sometimes she wanted to walk away. But then, the film shows what kept her going. Letters from young girls who saw themselves in her, encouragement from family, and the unshakable belief that progress is worth the fight, no matter how exhausting it may be. Why this documentary hits different. Plenty of political films try to inspire. 107 Days does more than that. It humanizes. It strips away the polished sound bites and lets people see the person underneath the title. For supporters of Harris, the film will feel validating. Proof that their vice president is not just tough, but also deeply human. For critics, it offers a perspective they may not have expected, a chance to see Harris. Not as a politician to debate, but as a woman carrying immense responsibility in an often unforgiving world. In a time when politics feels more divided than ever, 107 Days doesn't try to deliver easy answers. Instead, it asks us to consider the emotional cost of leadership. What does it mean to hold power while also being vulnerable? What does it mean to smile for the cameras while feeling broken inside? And most importantly, what does it take to keep going day after day when walking away might be the easier choice? More than politics, a human story. By the end of the documentary, one thing becomes crystal clear. 107 Days isn't just about politics. It's about humanity. It's about what it means to keep showing up, even when you feel like giving up. It's about the courage to admit your flaws, the resilience to stand back up after being knocked down, and the quiet strength it takes to keep pushing forward when the world is watching. Kamala Harris doesn't just share her journey as vice president. She shares her humanity, her scars, her doubts, her determination. And that's what makes this documentary unforgettable. For viewers, it's not just about learning who Kamala Harris is as a leader. It's about connecting with her as a person. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit that they're human too. Most people only see the highlight reel. The polished speeches, the carefully crafted sound bites on TV, the short clips that go viral on social media. But what 107 Days shows us is something different. It's the pressure behind the curtain. The part of leadership that most of us never get to see. We watch Kamala Harris walk into crowded rooms where every single word matters, where one misplaced phrase could dominate the headlines for days, where one wrong move could overshadow years of work. In those moments, the vice president isn't just a leader. She's also a human being carrying the weight of impossible expectations. Harris admits, with striking honesty, that criticism sometimes kept her awake at night. She shares that there were moments she questioned whether she was truly the right person for the job, whether she was strong enough to keep going, and whether she could live up to the history-making role she occupies. That kind of honesty is rare in politics, and it's what makes this documentary so powerful. Behind the scenes of power. In politics, we often see the performance, the speeches, the debates, the confident smiles. What we don't see are the quiet, exhausting hours behind the scenes. 107 Days pulls back that curtain. The film shows the reality of navigating a non-stop cycle of news coverage, partisan attacks, and endless criticism. Harris isn't just defending policies. She's constantly defending her very presence in power. Every stumble is amplified, every word dissected, and every silence turned into speculation. The cameras capture her moving from one event to another, often running on little sleep, holding meetings, listening to advisors, and then stepping in front of cameras where she must appear calm and in control, even when she feels anything but. It's a glimpse into the emotional toll of leadership, one that very few people ever talk about openly. The burden of symbolism. What makes Harris's story even heavier is that she isn't just navigating politics. She's navigating history. As the first woman, the first Black woman, and the first South Asian American to become vice president, she carries more than her own ambitions. She carries the hopes of millions who see her as proof that progress is possible. That weight is something she acknowledges in the film. She speaks candidly about how every mistake she makes isn't just judged on her. It's judged on what it could mean for women, for people of color, for anyone who dreams of following in her footsteps. In one emotional moment, she reflects on receiving letters from young girls saying, "Because of you, I believe I can be anything." For Harris, these weren't just fleeting encounters. They were lifelines. They were reminders that the work she was doing wasn't just about winning headlines or surviving another political storm. It was about inspiring people. It was about giving hope to those who felt invisible. And in her own words, Harris admits, these were the moments that reignited her drive when she felt burned out. These were the reminders that leadership isn't about being flawless. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. The power of small moments. In politics, the focus is often on the big stages, the debates, the speeches, the historic events. But 107 Days flips that script. Instead of glorifying the grand moments, it highlights the smaller ones, the ones that rarely make the news but stay etched in memory forever. The film shows Harris meeting people face to face, listening to their stories, and realizing that leadership isn't defined by polls or approval ratings. It's defined by the connections that inspire change. That hug at the rally? It wasn't planned. That letter from the little girl? It wasn't written for cameras. These unfiltered moments carried more weight than any policy announcement because they reminded Harris and the audience that behind the noise of politics are real people whose lives are touched by her presence. The lessons of resilience. Harris doesn't sugarcoat the difficulty of carrying that weight. She openly admits that there were nights she questioned if she was strong enough, if she was meant for this role, if she could truly deliver on the hopes placed upon her shoulders. But resilience, as the documentary shows, doesn't mean never feeling doubt. It means finding reasons to rise above it. She reflects on her late mother's influence, recalling the words she grew up hearing. "You may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last." Those words, Harris says, echo in her head during the hardest times. They remind her that her fight isn't just for herself, it's for the generations that follow. This theme runs through 107 days. Resilience isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about standing up again and again, even after the world knocks you down. The woman beyond the title. What makes the film so moving is that it doesn't just portray Kamala Harris as a politician. It paints a portrait of her as a woman, a daughter, a fighter, and a dreamer. We see her in quiet moments reflecting on her family. We hear her talk about the sacrifices her mother made as an immigrant raising two daughters. We watch her laugh with staff members, wipe away tears in private, and gather strength from her loved ones when the political battlefield felt too brutal. In those moments, Harris is not Vice President Harris. She's simply Kamala. And that's what resonates so deeply with audiences. Because beyond the power, beyond the politics, people see themselves in her struggles. They see a woman balancing impossible expectations while still pushing forward with determination. Why the film resonates. By pulling back the curtain, 107 Days connects with viewers in a way few political documentaries ever do. It doesn't just focus on strategies, victories, or controversies. Instead, it asks, what does it mean to lead as a human being? Audiences leave the film not just knowing more about Harris's political journey, but about her resilience as a person. They see her as someone who has been tested by fire, yet continues to rise. Someone who finds strength in the smallest gestures, and who continues to dream despite the odds. It's this balance between vulnerability and determination that makes the film unforgettable. More than politics, a human story. At its core, 107 Days isn't just about Kamala Harris, the vice president. It's about Kamala Harris, the human being. The woman who carries her mother's legacy. The fighter who refuses to let setbacks define her. The dreamer who believes that showing up, even in moments of doubt, can inspire the next generation. By the end of the film, audiences understand that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising every single time you do. And in Harris's journey, they see a story bigger than politics. They see a reminder that true leadership is about courage, persistence, and a willingness to keep moving forward, even when the path feels impossible. That's why 107 Days resonates so deeply. It doesn't just show Kamala Harris, the politician. It shows Kamala Harris, the woman, the daughter, the fighter, the dreamer. And in doing so, it reminds us all that resilience isn't just for leaders. It's for anyone who dares to keep going, no matter how heavy the weight of the world may feel. One of the most powerful parts of 107 Days is how Kamala Harris talks about criticism. She doesn't hide from it. She doesn't try to rewrite history. And she doesn't pretend she's never stumbled. Instead, she faces it head on. The documentary shows Harris in moments where the criticism was loud, relentless, and deeply personal. She admits that some of it cut her to the core. She acknowledges that there were times when the doubts piled up so heavily that she wondered if she was truly built for the role. But what makes these moments compelling isn't the criticism itself, it's how she responds to it. She owns her mistakes. She explains the lessons she took from them. And she makes it clear that every setback became a stepping stone to something stronger. Facing criticism without fear. In politics, criticism is inevitable. Every decision is analyzed, every word is dissected, and every misstep is magnified. Most politicians try to brush it off or pretend it doesn't bother them. Harris takes it different. She doesn't deny that criticism stings. She admits that there were nights she replayed harsh headlines in her head. She talks about the pain of being misunderstood, of watching opponents twist her words, and a feeling like nothing she did would ever be enough for some people. But instead of letting it break her, Harris reframed it. She turned criticism into fuel. She asked herself, what can I learn from this? How can I get better? That mindset shift, from seeing criticism as an attack to seeing it as an opportunity, is one of the strongest messages of 107 Days. Leadership is not perfection. Harris says something in the film that hits hard. Leadership isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it. That idea runs like a thread throughout the documentary. We see her stumble in tough interviews where her answers are picked apart in real time. We watch her weather unexpected controversies that no amount of preparation could have prevented. And we see her wrestle with the reality that in politics, perfection is a fantasy. Instead of being paralyzed by mistakes, she uses them as a compass. She reflects, she adjusts, and she keeps moving forward. The message is clear. True leadership isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise after the fall. Building resilience in the fire. 107 Days doesn't just show Harris being criticized. It shows how those moments forged her resilience. In one candid scene, she shares how early in her career, criticism used to overwhelm her. She felt crushed by the weight of it. But with time, she realized that being in a position of power meant carrying the burden of other people's opinions, fair or unfair. Resilience, for Harris, wasn't something she was born with. It was something she built piece by piece through experience. The film captures her talking about meditation, long walks, and moments of reflection that helped her process the noise. It shows her leaning on her family and her closest circle of advisors. And it reveals how, over time, she learned to separate the criticism that mattered, the kind that taught her something, from the kind that was simply meant to tear her down. The fight against the odds. One of the most striking parts of the documentary is how Harris frames leadership as a choice. A choice to keep showing up. A choice to keep fighting, even when the odds are stacked against you. The cameras follow her through moments when it would have been easier to step back, to play it safe, or to retreat. Instead, she doubles down. She talks about how criticism pushed her to be sharper in interviews, clearer in her communication, and more grounded in her convictions. She says, if you let criticism define you, you stop leading. If you learn from it, you grow stronger. That's the heart of her message, not just for politicians, but for anyone who has ever felt crushed by doubt or judgment. Why it resonates with viewers. For viewers, these moments hit home because they're so relatable. Everyone has faced criticism. Everyone has doubted themselves. Everyone has wondered if they were strong enough to keep going. Watching the Vice President of the United States admit she's felt those same things is both surprising and powerful. It breaks down the barrier between politician and person. It shows that at the core, even leaders at the very top fight the same inner battles that the rest of us do. And in that way, 107 Days becomes more than just a political documentary. It becomes a guide for resilience. More than politics, a human lesson. By the end of the film, Harris's reflections on criticism feel less like a defense of her career and more like universal wisdom. She reminds us that mistakes don't define us. Doubts don't destroy us. Criticism doesn't have to weaken us. Instead, these things can become tools that shape us into stronger, braver, more resilient people. That's the lesson of 107 Days. That's the reason this part of the documentary resonates so deeply. Because it doesn't just show Kamala Harris the politician, it shows Kamala Harris the human being, learning, stumbling, growing, and choosing to fight on anyway. For anyone who's ever been knocked down by life, this story is a reminder. Resilience isn't about being perfect. It's about refusing to stop. By the end of 107 Days, one thing becomes crystal clear. This isn't just a political documentary. It's a deeply human story. It's about resilience. It's about vulnerability. And above all, it's about the courage to keep moving forward, even when every part of you wants to quit. What makes this film stand out isn't the glossy highlights or the polished speeches. It's the raw honesty. Kamala Harris doesn't just sit in front of the camera to list her accomplishments. She doesn't try to frame herself as flawless or untouchable. Instead, she lays her scars on the table. She shows the moments where she faltered, the nights she questioned her worth, the times she almost walked away. And that honesty is what makes 107 Days unforgettable. Sharing scars, not just victories. Most politicians want you to see their victories. They want the image of triumph, the applause, the headlines, the big speeches. But Harris takes a different route in this film. She shares the other side, the scars. She talks openly about the toll of constant criticism, about moments when she second-guessed her choices, and about the weight of carrying so many expectations at once. She admits that being the first at so many levels of leadership comes with pressure unlike anything she could have prepared for. For viewers, these confessions are striking because they remind us that behind every headline is a human being struggling to keep it together. Harris may be the Vice President of the United States, but in this documentary, she comes across as something more familiar. A person who refuses to let doubt have the final word. The final scene, a lasting impression. Perhaps the most unforgettable moment of 107 Days comes at the very end. Harris looks directly into the camera, and in that quiet moment, she strips away every layer of political polish. She admits that there were times when she nearly quit. Times when the criticism, the pressure, and the constant scrutiny made her question whether it was worth it. And then, almost unexpectedly, she smiles. It's not the smile of a politician working a crowd. It's not a rehearsed grin meant for a campaign photo. It's a quiet, genuine smile, a reflection of survival. And in that expression, you realize something profound. She's still here, still standing, still fighting. That moment lingers with viewers because it captures the very heart of the documentary. Leadership isn't about never being shaken. It's about refusing to stay down. Beyond politics, a human connection. What's remarkable about 107 Days is that it speaks to audiences far beyond politics. Whether you agree with Kamala Harris's policies or not almost doesn't matter. Because this film isn't just about her positions, it's about her humanity. You don't have to be a Democrat, a Republican, or even politically engaged to connect with a story of doubt, struggle, and resilience. Everyone knows what it feels like to be criticized. Everyone knows what it's like to doubt themselves. And everyone understands how hard it can be to keep showing up when the world seems determined to push you down. That's why the film resonates so powerfully. It invites viewers to see Harris not as a headline or a soundbite, but as a person, a woman navigating one of the hardest jobs in the world while still holding onto her sense of self. Redefining leadership. At its core, 107 Days challenges the traditional image of leadership. It shows that leaders don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be invincible. They don't even have to have all the answers. What they need is the courage to keep going, the humility to admit when they're wrong, and the resilience to rise after every fall. This redefinition of leadership is perhaps the film's greatest gift to its audience. It reminds us that true strength is not about never breaking. It's about breaking and rebuilding over and over again. Why you can't miss it. So if you want to see Kamala Harris like you've never seen her before, not as a polished politician on a stage, but as a woman navigating doubt, criticism, and relentless pressure, then 107 Days is a story you cannot miss. It's raw, it's emotional, it's eye-opening, and it just might change the way you think about leadership, not only in politics, but in your own life. Because at the end of the day, 107 Days isn't just about Kamala Harris. It's about the battles we all fight inside ourselves. It's about the scars we carry, the resilience we build, and the courage it takes to keep moving forward, even when quitting feels easier. That's what makes this documentary unforgettable. It's not the politics, it's the humanity. And that's why, long after the credits roll, the story of 107 Days will stay with you.